later, I suppose, then.
Okay, that should be recording now.
Right.
What, it wouldn't let you record when you click?
No, but that's fine. If I'll email you afterwards or next week or something.
Yeah, that's great, Mal. Yeah, I'll get it done.
Get that. That'd be great.
So, can I just check?
I'll grab a screenshot as a.
Would you like me to do an introduction and then to play the clips in the order that they appear, or what format would you prefer?
I've got a little intro to say before the first clip. Other than that, absolutely fine. Yeah, you can introduce as you want. Yeah.
Excellent. Right. Well, what I will do then is I'll introduce you, Mal, and then you can introduce the clip, and we'll go like that through. So it's fine for you to stay online then through. I didn't know if it was one feature film or the clips.
Yeah, there's a few clips from it, the one film.
Perfect. Okay, thanks for joining, everyone. So I'm here to moderate. My name is Elsa Fisher, and I'd like to introduce for this presentation on grassroots culture versus the creative industry, Mal Williamson. So Mal Williamson has a combined career in film therapy and education. From community education, video workshops to full-time lecturing in media technology and communication studies. He also taught production techniques for Channel 4 film workshops in Leeds. His own production company specialised in the arts and public sector video production, although alongside there was work shown on Sky Sports BBC 2 and shown to the Cabinet Office. His multimedia product, The Drugs Box, resulted in commissions for the Government Central Office of Information and World Health Organization. He first worked with neurolinguistic programming back in 1982, writing an award-winning play using its language model. Later, he trained in the therapeutic method alongside integral eye movement therapy, provocative therapy, timeline therapy, and used these to set up a creator college for 16 to 18-year-olds not succeeding yet in school. He is now also using these therapies in his PhD, analysing eye movements in the cinema. Under the Weather was improvised over one weekend and features eye movement therapy for the first time. This no-crew production has won Best Director, Best Drama, and other awards around the world's festivals. Today's clips are from one feature project called Everyone Back to Ours, his second distribute feature, with two others commissioned by educational organisations for private use only. And although started in 2016, it was not finished until last year after delays with other productions and as personal realizations about the film changed its intent. So, sorry, I'll put that full screen and I will let Mal introduce the first clip. So take it away, please, Mal.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm starting with a confession that when I started the film 2016, and even when doing this last edit for last year, I didn't know this film was about class. So in terms of a sense of an artist and a community, what I was keen on was, here's our artist community, and we're enmeshed with all the bands and the local musicians in an isolated city in the UK, and then suddenly we win this city of culture. And it was same old story that people from out of town then rushed in, grabbed the money, did all the usual. So that was my story, that it was about artists trying to find a place in society, and a north-south divide that we have in the UK, well, in England for sure, all the money, etc. down south. And it was all about that kind of thing. And then it wasn't until afterwards, a friend introduced me to a group called the Working Class Creatives Database, an organization in the UK, a new organization. And I looked at what they were saying and looked at what I did, realize, oh my God, how ignorant have I been not to realize that this whole thing is about class, that every scene is about the class relationship, every organization, and everything I'm saying about arts is actually a class situation. And wow, that did throw me, that I knew so little. So there's my opening confession. For me, I find that like a genuine thing, that, well, yeah, it is class, because I wasn't trying to go out and make that happen. It's just there. I had other agendas. I was naming it by different things, but there it is. It's class. So for sure, lovely. Let's start with clip one. Thank you, Elspeth. Thank you very much.
Perfect, no problem. I'll thank you for that introduction. So would you like me to share the screen so you can see the clip, or will I just play the clip to the...
You can just play it if you want. Yeah, that's fine. That's probably easier.
No problem. I think I'll play it then if you put yourself on mute, maybe while we're playing it, and then can come back in and chat about it. So it's Little City. Perfect. I'm going to do that now. Oh, sorry. I'm going to target into Williamson.
Was actually existed after they never existed. Up to the wall of short area with one fifth of the country's water is the North Sea. The wine Dark Sea, as the Greek writer always said thousands of years ago. Wine dark, not blue. Because you never were for blue back then. You didn't really see it. What colours do we see now? All missing. Pinch. Things made in our brain, there's no frequency of light that's pink. But also make it. Some people made up city culture. We saw that we are a city culture, but we saw it. So for example, bring us into the commodified conventional colour soil as well. And size of them all. That's that. My name's Ellis Todd. I'm 25 years old. I'm a painter. I live in the city of culture. It's not difficult doing that. It's not doing it, that's hard. It's a little story, who cares about that anyway? Alright, this is your job to make it, fund it. Broken mountain paths alive. Another day sleeping out on the fly. Silver hills unfolding on the sky as we hold. Another day living like travelers, travelers go. So, values. You good? What's good with you? Yeah. If you were to see after
Soon.
Not Thomas, exhibition.
Please.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, did you actually have to?
Afterwards, so, you know, so, one of them's outside. Straight in the mouth. No. Good. Nice. Good. Was not necessarily so.
I'm making a What kind of shirt? And here I am, being now. You can see me.
Thanks.
You all right?
What was that story existed? After it never existed.
Sorry, it's just looping itself there. So that's the first clip. Okay, Mal, yeah, thank you for that. Would you like to talk between the clips then?
Yes, please. Yeah. The point of setting that up was to show a distinction about Hull, and it's saying there it's half a city. When you have a city on the bank of a river, we've only got like the top half. We don't have that surroundings. We don't have those richer suburbs. We just have these richer suburbs, and in Hull, these richer suburbs all vote Tory. They're a permanent right-wing voting area. The boundaries were moved so that Hull became 7 large council estates, essentially, and a university quarter, which permanently votes Labour. So the whole thing was set that was done in the 1980s as a permanent sort of lockdown. Prior to that, the history of Hull, it was very wealthy at one point. It was a whaling city. So it's extremely wealthy in the 19th century. And there are lots of large buildings and domestic buildings that were consoles built by embassies from around the world because of the whaling interests here. And then, of course, early 1900s, Britain goes to war with China, which stopped a lot of trade from that part of the country, from the eastern side of Britain. And of course, with the Russian Revolution, that then stopped the timber trade that was also coming from the Baltics into Hull. So Hull declined. It turned into a fishing industry, which was again lost when Iceland created a 300-mile border of fishing rights. So that kind of wiped out the whole fishing industry. So we end up with some large buildings, some nice looking stuff. A lot of it new because we were bombed in the war. The Luftwaffe would fly up from London, having bombed London, and they'd fly up the coast in the dark, basically, like they're using the coast to navigate. When they came to the Humber, they'd turn right, go across the North Sea, and find Europe, mainland Europe. So their bombs were all emptied on Hull, in the Hull docks and on the Hull streets and villages. So there's a lot of wiped out areas. It was more bombed than London, in fact, in the Second World War, which was never reported. The government didn't report it because that would mean reporting successes on the bombings. So Hull's a very strange city, makes it very poor, which is brilliant for artists. So our art school would attract people into the city who could then stay. And our artists in Hull could buy houses like I was able to do, can live cheaply, can live together, can set up organizations. So it meant quite a flourishing cultural situation. And then eventually with this idea of a city of culture, you know, we won that. because of our strong creative community. And we were all expecting great stuff from that. But of course, as usual, the rich stay rich and we come off worse. So it's a small but high achieving economy. So that's really what it was about. The next clip. They decide to make a logo. So the film starts to reflect what we did in reality. And Fraser, who's the artist here, was involved in that, involved in the film. You've seen him already, but he is actually an artist. So you see this kind of thing for real, although it was set up completely after the event. I've got some notes here, but it's about what is art. How does an artist work? What do we have to become designers and just sell work for other people? We have to commercialize. That's what this clip kind of covers. So play that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mel. I'll play that now.
Design. Create more me. It's not more yeah. You're for other views. So I've been advancing further with it pretty much on the technique. Yeah. See, this is still happening. You do this, wouldn't you? Because you are a self trainer. Well, yeah, I wouldn't practice first design because not design, not design. No. I guess think about making, having it, how to friends made it. It's oh, yeah. This will not look great. That's not what it's been said. How do it kind of not great? I thought that's what it is. It's not great, and then not great. Yeah, it's great. You're not shit at it. I really don't want to look like on fancy design. On fancy fresh. On fancy fresh. You got to do that. Why is it? So you can make it like it's all. We also have guessed everything we do is one. That's it. It's the cluster theory. There's no definition of that. There's nothing mean to me. That is a range of tick boxes and ticking off you have art. We more or less all have the same tick boxes. Is it meant to be art? Is it appealing or startling? It's maybe part of a genre or style. Some work. It's a thing. It's creative and creative. All of that roughly, and you're ticking up boxes and stop talking about whether it's art or not. We're all punching left of us because or some of us are artists. I just wonder whether it's whole or still take money, you know. So how much is the shop window? Who's coming in the shop? Everyone? Yeah. We're all artists now. We're all punters. I can't run some in-law campaign for friends and family. Special offers. They all know each other. Mates rates, mate. I call it economy and mates rates. Not too much. Yeah.
Okay. That's you back in the room. Sorry, Mal.
Thank you, thank you. Have you heard of this Beres gout and this cluster theory? You are aware of this? It's an idea of, instead of having to define something in theory, you can create a cluster of meanings, a cluster of definitions. And Beres gout applied this, I think it came from sociology or something like that. So Beres gout applied it to art, and had basically like a 10-point bullet point, like a list that we expect art to be this or to do that. And if it gets most of the 10, it's clearly art. And I do think that's quite wonderful. When you look at trying to sort of share art with people who aren't artists, or it can get very distracting. And I just wanted to deal with that in this film of like, well, what you see on screen, this amazing Philippustis with his, well, it's like a tongue, a meat tongue from a cow or something. It's incredible. And it's really startling in the room, and definitely ticks lots of boxes of art. Whereas clearly also in the room are people going, what's this? And we're back to that whole, what is the purpose of art? What's it for? What is it about? Meanwhile, you need to eat. The artists need to eat. And who's paying? Is anyone paying for an artist's time to make this work? And no. And what happened in Hull really is that we had a very nice community, and that was self-supporting, because the artists were and are teachers, lecturers, the odd doctor, maybe a dentist, as well as lots of unemployed, and lots of people self-employed, craft-based, basically poor, but with some economic stability. But I'm not sure about other cities perhaps, but here there was no audience. The audience in Hull are the people with disposable income, that they don't live in Hull generally. As I said before, Hull is that 7 large council estates surrounded by the richer, wealthier suburbs. So the people in the suburbs will come in and work. They'll take the council jobs and the top engineering jobs and that kind of thing, but they'll live out here. They pay their local council taxes out of Hull, and then they tend to travel elsewhere for leisure time. That they don't really come into Hull. And I don't think in our city of culture that the council ever realized this implication, and the opportunity was lost in city of culture to make Hull the center of this wealthier area. And we didn't manage to do that. There was another organization that had a grant as well, and they didn't even set any targets for this, that they were given a couple of £1 million to develop audiences in Hull, but they had no target for let's bring more people with the money in. And my targets were clear. I just said, well, why don't we just say 10%? So if I have a room for like an artist performing a band, say there's 20 people in the room, can we have an extra 2 that have come from out of town? That would be lovely. And an artist opening, a gallery opening, can we have an extra 5? And those people are potentially going to be buying. Let's just have a target for, like, let's get some money into our economy, into this creative artist economy. Because at the moment, as it says, we're all selling to ourselves. We're not really the wealthy people. We spend our time being artists and messing about. we don't earn that money unless at times I've been the lecturers, I've been at that end and then self-employed, and it's all up and down. And it's like, no, if you want an economy, we need that audience. And a lot of this film talks about the audience, and really in a class sense, this is not an audience. These are consumers. This is a marketplace. And we need to exchange our work and our time into that marketplace. And if the marketplace is just you, it's a lovely life, it's a lovely time, but it's not an economy. It doesn't allow that much freedom. So in this film, we have an agent, somebody who wants to sort of maybe sell his work and lends him some money to help that, which doesn't really happen in Hull. It was a bit, but some artists have made that kind of transition in Hull to some extent. But really, yeah. So the next seat is about this, the next clip. If there's any questions, feel free to pipe up. The next clip is that chase for an audience. So Ellis, the painter, goes off to talk to the bands. He talks to the musicians. What have they got to say about audiences? And here we go. That's the next clip, talking to a rapper who since went to China. So he just went to China and developed some work there, back in Hull now. He was a teacher as well, the guy in the clip, who would perform to hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of people in Hull, very, very popular. And as a teacher, is very popular amongst teens. So it's a very responsible, high level, very well-known performer in Hull. And enjoy this clip, please. That's interesting.
Any questions before we move on? I think we'll do some questions at the end, Mal.
Yeah, the discussion is genuine. I set them up. Well, you talk this, you talk that. Like much of the film, I wasn't scripting. It was, you do this, you do that. Let's see what you talk about. See what happens.
Ah, okay. So very improvised. Wonderful. Right, I'm going to get this playing now.
I'm aware of the audience, but at the end of the day, I can't just create for audiences. Who is my audience? Audiences are changing, tastes are always changing.
It's still all about the audience.
Yeah, but if you get hung on that, the reality is that
without an audience,
fashion changes.
Without people to see it, it's just a CD cover, it's just a painting in the room or wall.
People's tastes change. What's been said is the cool thing right now change. If you're always chasing that, one person at the top will bless it because that's what's in that, that's what's cool, that's what's happening now. Then you'll never be fulfilled because you'll always be chasing, because it's got to be more about you. The audience come, they see what you do and they're attracted to that. But if you're making it to attract them, then you're losing it, because it's about the creation, it's about the pleasure, it's about doing what you do better than anybody else. Like when I'm on stage, I feed off, the audience, but I also feed off my own energy. I feed off the energy it needs to my left there, right? Sorry, out to my left. I feed off them. Like making, creating, putting on something.
Out to your left, but I've been on my own.
You've been on
all by myself, and
I've been on that.
there's products out there that call people like you. You got Deeds, you got Alan, you got the band behind as well, kids to back you up, something's going wrong, it's not fresh, it's not there. What do you say, bye? If you're not getting the vibe, we'll say, but if I'm not getting the vibe, I'll just bounce up.
Yeah, but I've got those people around me. I do get opinions of people. I do have people, throwing in what they think. At the end of the day, be it CD, it will be on Spotify, be it on Facebook, be it whatever. That is why MB now, obviously, but my name is the one on it. Yeah, it might be named with people, but who's the criticism come out? Who was the, you know, who's the use on Facebook or YouTube, whatever else, and people go, oh, yeah. You know, for everybody who says, great, you know, you've got somebody who spent an entire night saying, oh, West, you know, great, taking place, that's their art, that's their creation. That's the audience creating. If you let that creation just get in the way of yours, so you're going to stop, then you'll freeze.
That's the most only about frustration. I don't feel frustrated, I feel alright. But then these things just happening that
We're at it.
like there is a physical act of frustrated, of being frustrated.
You got to worry about what you do and let other people take care of theirs. I know you've got all these jobs coming at you, but the venues, the promoters, the bars, the people who even come, like the arts council, but they can only focus on what they do. You can only focus on what you do. If you're getting too hung up on people frustrating and the acts of frustration, then you're losing it to the acts of this.
Just getting people with it. They're not letting me do what I need to do. But you're not. You're getting my way. I just feel bad, but just keep playing this match, just people around here just telling me what to do, how to do, where to do.
Yeah, but I still don't get all that stuff. At the end of the day, it's not all those jobs. You have pen,
Yeah.
you got cameras. It's how it's happening.
Be nice way.
Example.
That's school. You watch you rolling with the time. You roll it out there with all the time. Put up the show to get the bums on the seats. Their show, our bums on their seats. Take all the money with them. Put it on the side, like shits. You ever bought a house you actually put up? They're only something pointless, but still get ready. Some of them got cheap houses to rent out. They'll be living off us for years to come. They got the jobs to fund and we got to even get rid of them. We're shadowing on them, so we'll just got to get across something else to this. That's every job. We're all moving to the city of culture this year. The big old speak up and just your fucking fish bones. Our idea though, we just carry on. My friend looked at it. My friend didn't use it over and out. How about the shit, just come in all the time, so I don't do this job. I want to pay people who want me to get a job or who I want to pay. Awesome for the council who wants anyone. They put the picture of himself this. Not what you do, it's not the thing. It's not a handle what you do inside the way. It's like it's not letting you do, it's not the way it should be doing. Did you get a picture?
Okay, Mal, thank you. That was the third clip there.
Thank you. So in the background of that scene is a visiting film festival. They come up on a barge up the river into various cities, put up the screen and show films. Now in 2017, this is great, this floating cinema. They're not from Hull, and they didn't even show films made by Hull filmmakers. So I found the whole thing very, very annoying. Well, surely at least come and program whole filmmakers, because of course with it 2017, there's a lot of promotion. They get an audience there. You can see the audience there, about 100 people, no whole films on. And it's, this is ridiculous. It's and as a filmmaker, it's even more galling. So I thought, well, I'll film near there. That'll be a nice backdrop. And I do love the sequence, the shot, and having that in the background. And so I thought, well, I best, because I'd like to have them sat in the audience. So I'll contact them and say, look, we're making this film, and get permission to be there. And they then refused. So not only were they taking our money, got, what was that, 10,000 to book them to float up the Humber, then not show any whole films, then refusing a whole filmmaker to take part or to use this in my film. Then they tried to ban me from 300 meters, and they specified you're not allowed to film within 300 meters of us. At that point, I rang City Culture, I rang Film Hub North, one of the organizations, and just what on earth is going on? I mean, one of them, they were funding me for a festival that I've been running for a few years, a short film festival. So I knew some contacts there, rang the City Culture. I was absolutely furious. And they were kind of, well, that's their point. Well, I said, it's not legal. They can't stop me. So I'm turning up anyway. So we went along and shot the scene. But the anger fueled that kind of response in terms of floating in on the tide, floating in and out on the tide. Now, actually, when we were there, then there's this other class sense to it. So the people running the show are like that. They have their legals, their ideas of how to control art and culture. I get there and this music is playing while they were setting up the screen. They're playing music, so you can't edit when you shoot the film. The music keeps changing. So I went over, asked them to stop. Very, very helpful, very nice. I knew one of them at least anyway, because Hull's a small place and the community's a small place. So I knew one of them who got involved on the sound side, who was setting up. And there was no problem at all. It's a real, amongst the community, amongst the people, it's fine. We get this, but the people higher up, they want to control, and it's just very, very difficult. And then the rest in that statement is, if you can hear it over that hard bop jazz, also filmed recorded in Hull. All the music's from Hull people. Yes, people who came from out of town on the good wages of the City of Culture, they bought houses. They saw the price of our houses. People bought half a dozen. So they're still living off us. They've come into the city, bought houses with their wages that we won City of Culture. They get the wages, and then they go off, and they're still living off us in that way. It's absolutely disgusting. Now, I have no problem with people buying houses, renting them out, not at all. It's not a problem, but there was too much of it. And they would claim that even in the statistics, they claim that, well, they employed whole people. But in what was known as the Crow's Nest, up high in one of the buildings in the Arts Quarter, sat most of those people all in rows, typing away. They were the employed people, with a few people, the head honchos in the good money. And it was such cronyism because they all knew each other. And it was just like one of them had the proper job now. So they'd ring their friends and they'd get other jobs around it because they had the proper job and they'd employ all those people. So they all knew each other like a team. And since then, during that, they set up a company, went off before the end of 2017. They'd already moved en masse to Edinburgh to run the Edinburgh New Year's Eve celebration, which is a big international affair. They went to run that. And then they got the job for the Brexit festival very recently. So we had this awful thing, Brexit, I'm sure you know about, horrendous. And a lot of money was put into a Brexit festival. that is just reported back as an absolute failure. Nobody went, like 100,000 people went across the UK. They're expecting 15 million, a total failure. The same people that ran 2017 took this thing on, and hopefully it's all collapsing, this commodifying of art and commodifying of culture and the exploitation of what a community will do by itself. So, oh, there's another thing in there, consecration. What the rapper is talking about, 90s boy, he's talking about a thing I've learned since, is consecration, a religious term, but there's an article in the Journal of Marketing and Management, and talks about how people can get consecrated by the critics or their peers. And people think we need the critics to tell us whether our films and work is good, but actually we need the peers to tell us. Within film, we need the peers to say, oh, they're good. Then the critics will look. And then you get the two of them, and we get the blessing that 90s boy. Now, he wouldn't be aware of this theoretical perspective or anything, but he actually uses the blessing, this religious term, and it is actually the term of consecration within the arts, within culture. And once you are consecrated, everything can change for you as a career. And you'd like to, we were hoping Hull would get consecrated and they would pay attention to Hull artists, but no. There's more to those stories, and some of which legally I couldn't put in the film, but most of it I could get away with. So the next clip is a longer clip, and it widens everything out now. This becomes a more historical perspective of arts. What is the function of an artist in society? If you know anything by Yuval Noah Harari, that kind of work, he's published recently. Now, I was actually using this before his big book of Sapiens, I think it is, because of somebody called Rogan Taylor, who wrote a book called The Death and Resurrection Show. So it's a wonderful book, very, very rare to get hold of now, that traced artists back from shaman, from the shamanic times into modern day rock stars, etc. So that's what this is outlined in this clip. I just figured that if I can get artists in front of this film, then I want to tell them about this. So the story goes, Charlie, Ellis's potential girlfriend, her brother commits suicide. And we had a few suicides happening in the city. It's rising again now, but there was a spate in the arts community, so I was happy to use that slightly. Ellis can't cope with this and abandons the city. He leaves the city and he goes to find a chap called the Keener. So enjoy.
Thank you, Mal. I'll just get that in right.
Down drawn to your sound for all of my sin. I will not go believe. Sell me out, I believe. I'll let it go. Okay. This is reflection. Where we are now, this space, this is reflection. This is what you see to do a lot of. Everything's coming in, it's going into you, it's all about you. You need to reverse that. And with me then, what we need to do is we need to move from here, from this inward feeling of like, oh, thinking about everything, thinking too much, to over here. Yeah, in the world, that's all. that, over here we can reflect, we can connect it with make changes, always use brush. How about dropping the bag? Drop the bag, grab the brush, and have a go. We'll be on it, won't it?
Under the fire and storm, all that I ever known was waiting for me. Was waiting for me. Was waiting for me.
Is that it? Come on,
Waiting for me.
now look. Where do you like going? What do you know? What do you want to do? You can't change what you've done last time. What's next? What's, you know, what do you do next? Make that decision. You're already jumping in the face. That's brilliant. Yeah, you can look. You reflect. Okay. This is where you take all your knowledge, all your understanding, all your training. This is where you think about that. Over there, if you're going to apply it, come back. That was a good day. It was a good day. Did you enjoy it?
So there makes a difference, isn't it? Just different personality when your family have found you to that. It's good stuff, and it is just they're tools that you can use. Like triggers, you know, buttons you can press when you can take control, press those buttons, and you know you get that good results. Right, so let's talk about the value of the work. What makes an artist valuable? Because at the moment we don't feel very valuable. So what makes you valuable?
It's a way of formulating discussion about art, whether it's positive discussion, whether it's negative discussion, people talking about art, kids and my way. So
What is your worth as an artist? There are millions of artists, everyone's making work in their kitchen tables or studios or at me on my own. What makes your work different? What makes your work valuable, you know?
the straw, the paintball feeling, so it's our own sound. I'm going to paint series, just I don't know. I got one paint when I'm in the gallery in the studio. Just paint, can't pick up brush as well.
So what is a brush?
Brush is the instrument used to apply into.
And what's a canvas?
This would be there.
So what's paint with you?
I tend to kind of keep.
So what is art?
I don't feel like it's up to me. I'm not going to dictate to people what my art is. My art's different to everybody looks at it and can look at it in a different way. I will. And I think that's what they'll do it for me. I don't tell people how to do that. I don't tell people what they can do this. You know what I mean?
But what is art for you?
I think something that makes me. I can be actually, the end, it's not about, it's not just game, it's about something that told you something inside you that makes you feel different and you felt really new there.
So what do you do when you see something or you feel something that way? What do you do? When you get that feeling, when you feel something, when you feel art, what do you do?
Just stay still, just nothing. Just listen to it, and just stay with it.
So what is it? What is it that captures you? What is it?
In the moment, depending on what the art is, I always can wear the same thing and I'm just happy that it's all that this piece is in what I exist. Not always, no matter how we feel initially, I just come away with the same feeling. And joy.
So you got a rule book, like this is what I do. You see something that captures you, you stop, you've got that moment, you've got that feeling. Do you photograph it? Do you draw it? What do you do?
That's just very nice. Come away. Just please next to that. And that would be a bit of experience.
Let's go back to what we had earlier when we were talking about our positions, like we can loads and like creating and speculating, first position, second position, reflecting. And let's talk about the audience, right? How do you feel about the audience?
No.
So do you feel like you need something when you make work? Do you need a response?
From the people.
From the people, from your friends, from you, like.
Yeah. But yeah, I didn't hear the good thing you know. I'd like to know. Yes.
Who's your audience?
Anyone who wants to come and see.
That's not your audience. They're your friends, they're your family, but that's not your audience. Who's your audience?
We can't find those around us, like, so.
But you do have an audience. The thing about what we were talking about earlier, we were talking about performance positions. You go through the position, and then the third position, you've got an audience. You have an audience. Inside your head, you have an audience. Who's your audience? They might not see your work. They might not see your work yet, but who's the audience that you want?
All the audience are people who would see me when I was young, I want the people who put this, I want people who show us that I was like, not the 10 people that I get now.
Right, so you've got tens of thousands of people come to see your work. Does that make your work better? Does that give you value?
Makes me feel better about it.
But does that make you a better artist?
But we'll see, but don't give me on that.
It's the wrong answer, right? Do you even know what an artist is? Do you know what you are as an artist? Do you know what that is as an artist? Let's say I said you were a shaman, right? Do you know what a shaman is? You're the person they go to see things. They want to know, they want to understand. And you provide them with that. That's what you do, that's your audience. You're showing your audience what you do. You're giving them understanding, you're giving them that experience. That same thing you get when you see something, you feel something, and then you can make art. Your art can do that to people, that's your audience. You want to find those people that see your art and they feel the same way that you do when you bring it. That's your audience, that's your role, you're the shaman. But you can shine a light on something, what you're doing is you're opening doors, you're kind of showing the world as it is, not as people say it is, not as media is, not as the internet says it is, not as your stupid social media says it is. What you do is real. It goes back to before we started farming, before we started religion, before we started anything else. Do you understand? Let's go back, let's go way back, let's go campfire, cave, tribe, and you have shame. Shame is the person who makes sense of everything. Shame is the person who tames the wild, that gives people answers to the unknown, that provides reassurance, explains everything, death, pain, famine. That's the person that you are as an artist. That's what you are. You're ashamed. You're the person who shines a different perspective on things. You give people that light. You give that people that opportunity to see things differently. You provide the stories. You tell the tales. You create the music. That's what you did. Everything. That's what shames are. They provide that. And these days, everything's broken down. Everything's we get our entertainment, we get our medicine from the doctor, we get everything separately. 10,000 years ago, we stopped following we started sowing seeds and reaping bread and stopped, and that was it, we stopped. Now these days, we've got entertainers and we've got doctors and we've got politicians and we've got all these things that, it's all been segmented. But shame used to do everything, and that's what you still have to do as an artist. You have to see everything, and you have to give your work. And then people can come and can see, like through your work, they can see what you see. And that gives you the greatest value. That means that when someone connects with you, even if it's just one person, 7, 10, 10,000, just one person feels the same way you do, then you're successful. People go to work, they push pens, they press buttons, but what you do is different. What you do is you look at these people, you look at these things, you make sense of it, you give people, you reflect back, and you show people what's important. You show people truth. You show people that all this crap is just crap. That's what makes you ashamed. That's what makes you a fucking artist. That's what's important. That's what gives you fucking value. That's everything that you need. When you stood there and you're alone and tired and poor and hungry, that's what you need to think about. That's where your value is. That's your audience. That's your purpose. That's what those magic moments are about. Those precious moments when you see something, you feel it, and you just, those are the things you want to share. Because those are the things that happen inside you, those are the explosions inside you, and that's what you gift to other people. And that's what the shaman does. It's exactly what the shaman does. Do you understand the value of what it means to be a shaman? What it means to be an artist? The responsibility that you have to show what you know. Some people, like we can't make it. I can't make this stuff. Can't make it. If I made it, it'd be like wonky and weak. It'd be fucking useless. Can't make that. Someone else makes it up. I can't make it up. Like you, I paint. That's what I can do. I paint. That's my role. And I use my painting to show people what I see. You need to know about shame. You need to know what it is. You need to know the kind of how real it is, how important it is, how true it is. You have to feel it. Because it's not just about you're the shaman, you've got the insight. It's more than that. It's simple, it's pure, and it's honest. And it has more value than money or fame, or it gives people the chance to live. And that's more important as an artist than any other thing. You show people the meaning of life in an instant, in a second, just that 1 second, people live because of what you've done. You can't ask for more value than that. The same way with wine. That's value to life. You are value to life. That's relationship.
Thanks, Mal. Yep, we've just.
Thank you.
There.
The bits at the beginning of that where he's telling him to go forward and come back, they emerge from a therapy that I practice, and it's a very useful idea. It's a bit like the tradition of don't criticize somebody till you've walked in their shoes for a mile. It's that kind of idea, but very useful in a therapy with a client, that you can ask somebody to just actually sit somewhere else and just sit next to this and then talk to that person in the chair. And it's about getting mental perspectives. And I set up an art college called Creator College in Hull. And we use this a lot with young people, helping them to sort of just go and do the work here. When you're here, just do it. Stop the conversations. And then you can step back and think. And when you step back and think, you literally step back. And artists, painters have been doing this for centuries, really, stepping back and looking. But the actual physical embodiment, as I say, used in therapy to actually move somebody out of a chair into another chair. Then you can move them into another position and another position as they take sense of what's happening. So we use that a lot in art, and myself and John were working there. I'm developing, and he would work there, and we do this with people. So it is a very effective way of teasing out, because artists will go in and in and in, constantly reflecting, constantly going in and wondering why and all this sort of stuff. And you got to break out and go do something. So it was about that. And throughout the film and throughout life, really, that mental resilience is needed, and artists need it a lot, because it's sort of right in the opening scene, the early scene in the bar with his friend Charlie, and he's got his painting on the wall. And it is that, as an artist, you put your work on the wall, you kind of put your life on the wall. And even if we are shaman, even if the society role is shaman, and I don't mean shaman in magic and things like that. It's shaman in a role in society to explain the wildness of what's happening. So if we are that role, we still need that thing of like, well, we're experiencing it and we're putting our experience on the wall. So I'm kind of trying to say, yeah, everyone's working hard and doing stuff, but artists just do it in a different way. And for that, I think creatives need a better mental resilience than is offered. The models of psychoanalysis don't work for artists. They don't work for anybody, actually, but it's like, the new stuff coming from neuroscience is very interesting and adds a lot. So that was the reason. And you can see in this, I'm taking that mental personal into society. And that was the plan, trying to fuse together a sense of the purpose of being this kind of person, which I imagine is needed. I think, if the world moves towards universal basic income and societies start to have money sorted out, there's going to be a lot of people who need entertainment, but real entertainment, real engagement with themselves, with life, with the mysteries, with each other, in communities. We need engaging, and we need to be able to communicate and express that sense. So the mixing of a creative force with a a mental resilience is massive importance for me. Right, final clip, next clip. Can he solve any of this? We'll see. It's not the end of the film, this. You'll have to watch the film to see the very end. But he returns to Hull. I'll leave that there with you. Oh, well, he returns to the music returns to its heart of the folk clubs.
Brilliant. Okay, get that lined up.
Looking like you, Councillor Pollard. Good. Jackie popping out, was it? Yeah, it's only that Jackie. Well, you know, when you're dealing with people like you have to present them all the time. I did mention that on the art subcommittee, didn't I? Oh, yeah. Because we had one said, you only get one chance to leave a first impression, and he was right. Well, I can, yeah, I'm good feeling about all this now. I can see big money coming into it. So I've had a couple of meetings, just yesterday actually, when I met with some of the property developments. I think once all the festivals and stuff out there in the city of culture sort of setting on, we can start looking at big money coming in. Big money for the arts or big money for the flats? Culturally and the social political thing, part of all that, and the commodity. I'm a shit way to fly all the time. Looking like you, Councillor Pollard. Good.
Okay, there we go. That was that bit.
Thank you, sir. He returns and goes back to his work. I suppose I won't say it's all what happened, but it doesn't necessarily work out for him. I don't think he quite resolves what to do. And in 2017, we couldn't resolve this problem with the artist. There was a grant was added to us. A fund was made available for artists to apply to, local artists to apply to. So we all did, and I remember talking to Martin, who's actually featured in the film. Martin, who ran the City of Culture, he does pop up and said that's okay. Remember talking to him, and he said, well, this local arts fund, he said, Mal, we'll have 90 applications for Shakespeare. So, throw your thing in, we'll give you some money. And it was like the guy had no idea, Martin Green, no idea of what was in the city. I said, well, you'll have two applications for Shakespeare, one from the Theatre and Education and one from the chap who lives 50 miles away, 100 miles away, who's always doing Shakespeare in local dialect, which they did. They both applied. The money went to hospitals and it went to schools. The money outlined for local was actually channeled through schools projects that had their own funding and through the NHS. It was appalling, and there's some top artists who didn't get any money. So there was a protest. I was on the radio and other people, and we had a meeting with them and stuff, and it was kind of about the curation, and they curated the art, which is fair enough, but a real shame, a real opportunity lost. You know, the artists were just used as cultural glue to say, hey, look, we're all in this together. And those places where it's filmed, they're still there, but they are apartments, they are flats now. And those people in the flats complain to the local venues that they're too loud. They complain when festivals are on because they bought property there. And many are investors from out of town as well who are just renting these places out. They're a lovely old world. Just on a street that used to be like the market trading, the fruit and veg, and that kind of thing. And if even before the festival, that all would have been knocked down if artists hadn't moved in there. So it's a classic gentrification story as well, which isn't in the film because, well, it kind of is at the end. They're getting thrown out, the arts organization. Ellis gets thrown out of his studio by the people who have turned up to do all this. It's a strange game. As I say, I look at that film and go, how did I not realize that it's all about class? It's all about the class situation. It's very, very strange. I'll leave it there, see what you got. Got any questions? If there's any questions for me, that's lovely. Or I can nabber on other things.
Wonderful. Yes, I think we have a question here.
I was just wondering about the process of production. Like, how did you actually put it together in terms of, like, was it improvised? Did you have more than one camera on it? Did you shoot it in blocks? Did you shoot it or do it all yourself? Did you work with the crew? All that kind of stuff.
Thank you. We had one camera, and I did borrow a friend as a photographer. I asked him to get involved. So I was very new to these digital SLR cameras. The camera itself, it's over there. It was about 10 years old, that camera, when we started filming with it. So it wasn't one of the best at the time. But my attitude was one, I'm just going to make this film. I cannot fight this situation politically or economically with the college and or even with other artists, so I will just make the film. So, and since then, the next one I made with no crew whatsoever, because I learned that through this, you don't really need a lot. You don't need a lot, and improvising is a beautiful situation that generates its own truth. Now, the actor in Ellis is an actor. He's worked on television. So the main painter fellow is not a painter. He's actually an actor. So it was very good working with him. And Charlie was also an actor. She got pulled away on tour during production. So there were lots of delays. It was a very sporadic production, hard to keep momentum going. But when we filmed, there's basically one camera. I'd have the other chap there. He had good lenses, and we maybe switched cameras, but we never did a sort of two cameras at the same time. So the conversations that are cut together are all, let's film it this way and then film the other way. And the way I work, I tend to sort of just note, right, I need reaction shots to that. That's good. We'll use this. And the wonderful thing with the actors is actors seem to remember and can repeat what they did. Whereas the people they're working with, the non-actors, they don't really remember. They're just as good because they're playing a version of themselves. So there's a real truth, but you have to sort of coach them back into what we were talking about in the conversation. So a lot of it is that it's a nice three-way situation. And I say I've done more of that since. It's doable in a digital age. You can fix it. You can bring the microphones in. The sound quality is enough. It's better in recent films than this one. always available light. Just use available light. That's absolutely fine. It's just a case of you're in the world, you have a camera, you position yourself, you have some people, we have a thing we're trying to uncover and explore. Let's go. Let's see what happens within the scene. I guess prior to that, there's a level of technical skill. Used to teach, for many years this stuff, and was working. So there is some level of that. And I had a long gap not making films, and during that time I was recording. My partner's a singer, so I got into recording and sound, so learned a lot of the sound side of things, which by the time it came together for projects like this, you got your digital image information, but also a lot of good digital sound information and experience, so you can kind of feel brave that this is doable. And it means, as a filmmaker, I'm very light, I'm very cheap. We can make this film, we can do this film, we can move fast, and no one need notice what we're doing. So then that's nice. That's nice as a filmmaker. I'm like a writer or a painter, a composer. That's how I feel that I operate.
Any other questions? I was thinking, Mal, just about the sort of time periods that we're thinking about with this work, and you were saying about your experiences first moving or being able to buy property as an artist in Hull, and then this time period from 2017 with the City of Culture, and now thinking on 5 years on from that even. What's the kind of interplay between those, as you said, reflections on the past, but then also looking forward? I'm wondering what has been the fallout of this City of Culture and what the situation is for artists now.
Yeah, the insights I gained later by not finishing the film till about 4 years later. It was like, aha, that's what's been going on. So our character at the end of the film is allowed to make some exactly that conclusion. And what we have now is celebrities. All our artists who are known to the other arts community and respected, and it works in a very cohesive way. No, that they now have to be celebrities. I suppose part of it is social media, but a lot of it is that influx of 2017, the whole bums on seats approach to an audience, that we just need to sell some tickets. We've got to get publicity. We've got to be on the right radio program. We've got to be on TV, and the same celebrity people get chosen each time for the funding. So we have a situation where there's maybe half a dozen artists who get it all. They get all the projects, and we this consecration is no longer kind of like national or international or in your field. For us, this consecration seems to have just gone to our city, and all we need is just like, oh, can I get that funding tick box? And then I will constantly keep getting the funding as long as I do the same thing. As long as I deliver what they want me to deliver. Once you've been anointed and consecrated, stay there. Do that thing, because you're getting paid. And that is very powerful. Very, very powerful. So you're not an artist anymore. As such, you're not thinking, I'll go do this now, I'll go do that. You have a job in the arts, and there's maybe half a dozen who are doing that. We didn't get the audience from out of town, that they don't come into Hull anymore. So the richer money who could buy tickets don't really come here. We do like the free stuff. We all turn out for the free stuff in the street. So our Freedom Festival is a lovely event. It's just been on, and people will flock out to that. We have the Humber Street Sesh, the big local music thing. It was smaller this year, but I think that's with pandemic kind of repercussions. Although the street, it's called Humber Street Festival, Humber Street Sesh, 200 odd local bands and an audience of 40,000 when it started. It's been going for about 7 or 8 years now. This year is a lot less bands, it's shrunk, but the actual Humber Street wasn't even in the festival. They have to push it out because Humber Street is now, instead of it being the galleries that you see in the film and the artist studios, it's some very posh artist studio, a store. The gallery is basically a bar. The other gallery is a block of flats. And then there's 5 or 6 restaurants. It's all for people trying to get that richer money in to come down Humber Street. So they weren't even part of Humber Street Sesh anymore. The legacy is gentrification in that part of town. And I don't think the artists have worked out where to go yet. Or they're saying that there is another block in the city centre. So the city centre is now a bit more empty of retail. That's been filled with some artists. So there's about 4 or 5 artist groups come together that sort of work together or work separately, providing studio space. I don't feel that's new. I don't think it's new. I think it's more about if a property company can get some artists into an empty building, they're not paying rates.
Yeah.
So the rates don't go to the council. The artists go in there and don't sell from there. So the artists can't sell. I don't like that. They're not economically viable, but they can rent the studio and they get a cheap sort of, it's a workable situation, but not the best. That's the same that always was. There's a lot said really about our legacy, Elspeth. There was no sense of legacy. People did not know. And our city arts officer, he would often say the council, who are ultimately in charge, they don't know the difference between arts and creative industries. So they don't know the difference between a design company and websites and coding. We have some very successful programming and coders in the city, that sense of the arts community, but they don't know the difference between that and artists working in a different way, producing art. They don't understand those relationships and what the artist is for in a community. Before we even get into the music industry, because that's kind of, I suppose, the same as it ever was. There's DJs, there's bands, there's gigs on. It's fine. It's fine. There was no consecration of our city beyond what was mentioned at the beginning, where we got on the weather map, and we're still on the weather map 5 years later. When they have the national weather, Hull is there. We're still there. Yay.
You were never before that. Any other questions?
I've got while you're there's no questions, there's a couple more things. 2 weeks before, this relates actually to your question, thank you. 2 weeks before we started filming, our producer left. Now, our producer was a theatre producer, and she was a student at the university and was decided to stay on because of 2017 and do an MA in the city, and was working as a producer in theatre. So she was ideal for us. She knew how to organise everything and let's just get it on. So there was an attempt to get a standard sort of production together, and she was one of those. And she left because of things I posted up. You know, when the City of Culture announced the results of its local funding, everyone was appalled by it. I was vocal about it and went on the radio, and she asked me to take stuff down from our Facebook page. I said, well, you're an admin, you take it down. I'm not going to take it down, but if you want to take it down, you take it down. I don't know what your problem is, but it's the fear. She was scared that this would affect us or would affect her career. And, you know, I'm long past the career opportunities, but I can understand the position. It's like, okay, you know, but people forget that power and that power that's there in this film. It does need talking about within an arts funding as well as everything else. But it's, you know, I did say this a few months later or a year or so. I was talking to one of the City of Culture people and say, you know, my producer just left because she was scared of what you would do. And he was laughing. I said, well, this might be funny for you, but it was really quite bad for us. It sort of just cut everything down as to what the scope, I guess. But it's that they don't understand that power. And he was fine. He was like, well, there's nothing. Why? Of course, we're allowed to critique and criticize. It's almost like individually, you know, everything's fine. We're all creatives, we're all artists. we'll all get on, but operationally, no, there's such a platform and a way of behaving that's very difficult. And finally, in terms of my ignorance, I think I'm better at making films now. It's a very good experience doing this one, to go into that long stretch. This film ends up, the full film is why we didn't show it, is 2.5 hours long, about 2 hours 20. So it's a bit long for people. The structure that I'd planned, the scenes were like within a structure. So I had a structure, what I think's going to go on. So, you know, in a film that you have a thing called rising action as the character's in control, falling action as they're out of control. Now, I don't mind these structures. I'm not a fan of the hero structure that has pervaded everything from superhero films, ever since Star Wars, really. We've got this hero structure myth in film. So Western cinema has really just limited itself to the same story over and over again that puts an individual in power and control, and it's not very good. I realized that what I'd made was a rhapsody. It's the old Greek structure, going back to Aristotle, who developed these dramatic structures initially, and I'd done an actual rhapsody, which was several poets would travel, and each poet would deliver a certain section of the story. And that was what I had, that we had all this music, and I'm often using the full track of a local band, which is partly why it went so long. So it's like music, I'm just going, oh, it's like music videos, it's fine. But it's a rhapsody. There's these different portrayals of what art is, what an artist in society is. There's different elements of the story, and they're presented by a different band, by different musical backing, one section out after another. There's a prologue and there's an epilogue. I added those when I realized what I'd done. All right, we'll have prologue and epilogue then, and the bit in the middle. So that's the structure. It's not that hero's journey that people would expect. So I kind of think it's powerful, that in terms of, that's a real thing then. What Aristotle did with that, it's real. This just happened out of this community. So I'm wondering if other films are like that, because if you make a film in a community, you get that sense. If you make it controlled and powerful for one voice, maybe it lends itself to the hero journey as a more natural myth on it. But it was surprising how well suddenly the film fitted in. And I would like to know from yourselves, I've got a question. Marxism and the artist. I have a feeling today that creative industries and all the arts in some word would be added to the institutions. It'd be like education or the church. It'd be part of this dialectical materialism. It's a valid part of society. But when I talk to people, what I understand is that Marx didn't really rate art. It was commodified for him, and that was enough. And I wonder what the position is now, and is that relevant to why you know, this conference, you're inviting so many creators to come and talk. It's a really, yes, I want to know, what do we do? How is this society measured, and what does it, you know, what's our future?
I think that's a good question. I wouldn't necessarily be the person to speak about it, in the sense I didn't organise a conference. I'm here as a filmmaker, but it is interesting. And obviously, you know, the area I work in as well as being a filmmaker is about the political economy of the creative industry. So within that framework, in a kind of post-Marxist analysis, yeah, arts and culture are commodified. They have a kind of an economic value within the cultural economy. So that, in a way, dictates you know, how those commodities are constructed, and also helps shape the actual identity of the people who create it, because they, like the commodities they produce, become commodified themselves in some ways. So that's, you know, it's interesting. I mean, I think, you know, classical Marxists might say that, you know, art and creativity becomes fetishized in a bourgeois society, and that, you know, the revolutionary art has to have a social remit, has to be there for a reason beyond either some kind of narcissistic form of self-expression or just being an economic commodity as well. It has to have a revolutionary remit. I'm not particularly, that's, you know, I guess, you know, some films I make are kind of, you know, activist films. Some are in a university setting, some are more commercial for broadcast. So there's obviously different ways of doing it, but I think, you know, it's definitely the case that, for instance, in my area, people used to look at that there was a drive to away from the idea, what was crude Marxist determinism, that just dictated culture. The culture and the arts were just a kind of weird byproduct of the really important subjects like class and economic inequality, and that resulted in the cultural studies of the 1990s. People like Professor Stuart Hall and the British Cultural Studies movement wanted to look at cultural texts themselves. Now there's a new generation of thinkers who are more, I think, involved in thinking about culture and creativity as a economic system, and they're kind of influenced by these people like David Hessenhower, who are kind of like neo-Marxist political economists who talked about cultural production as well. There's some interesting people doing work in that area. So my point being, I suppose, that yeah, art or creativity has always been situated within economic relations, you know, and that analysis is now coming back into vogue as well. People have to see cultural productivity in terms of you know, kind of economic forces, but that might be slightly odds with the way that you're talking about it in your film, which is more kind of shamanistic, kind of psychosocial kind of effect where you know, it's the artist as conduit into another plane of perception, which I quite like in some ways. I mean, I don't dismiss that idea, even though I think it's quite at odds with the kind of more sort of conventional political economist idea of the arts, sort of that way, which would kind of see it as more of a kind of a byproduct of certain economic relations. But I mean, I kind of, my father was an artist, you know, and he was probably the closest thing to a shaman I've ever met. So I don't dismiss the idea entirely, you know. But and I think it's kind of nice to kind of return to that idea sometimes, because I think sometimes if you only see art or creative practice as either a form of political practice, praxis, or as a byproduct of economic determinants, then sometimes you can lose some of the things that you're talking about in your film, which would be a shame if that was the case. Which is possibly the more kind of indeterminate, slightly more mystical kind of part of the process.
Yeah, I find that element very interesting as well. The sort of, I suppose, quandary that everybody finds with the purity of the artist and the sense of conduit and shamanism versus the need for pragmatic things like space, materials, which all come back to connecting to this economy. And I'm here as a filmmaker as well. Something that really chimed with me, Mal, was this sense of how are people, you know, trying to seize back the means of control and operate on a grassroots level. That's research and work I presented was about grassroots groups in Belfast, the connections between activism and arts and how they're all operating when there is no governmental funding that ever trickles down. You know, instead they're just setting it up themselves in DIY manners, and what sort of you know, zones those can fit within. I think I get a sense that there's a similar thing happening in Hull and maybe many cities as well, in Belfast certainly, where artists are being pushed out of studios. We had the Array Collective win the Turner Prize this year, and they're still being evicted from their city centre studio spaces in Belfast. And so you wonder what kind of accolades they would need in order to be valued by our council. Clearly it's still an issue, but so I think there's similar things.
What I find very interesting and slightly depressing, but obviously the case is, and I know about this from, I mean, I'm based in London, but I lived in Sheffield for a long time. You know, cities by necessity need to capitalize on the idea of culture and creativity. It becomes part of their remit, but also, ironically, it seems to create almost what you're talking about, which is this kind of group of mobile, professional kind of arts organizers that can almost migrate from project to project or city to city and capitalize on the kind of the cultural resources of the city, that instrumentalize them in terms of bringing, you know, in terms of, you know, maintaining their own careers, or sometimes bringing in additional funding. But quite often, you know, that doesn't really benefit the artists who constitute the resource that is being extracted or being exploited. You know, it's kind of more, it's a form of cultural practice, really. Absolutely. Where the arts industry, and that's what I talk about, you know, that as an industry, you know, which is to say, it manufactures something, it has, you know, attempts to make a financial return, kind of instrumentally kind of deploys whatever local resources they can find and then kind of moves on. And I think that is probably what's going on, and certainly from the way you're talking about it, you know, and it's so sad if that's happening, but probably something that's worth examining or looking at and analysing, and because, you know, maybe that's the, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if that's the new phenomenon. It's not new. I mean, even London is a massive city, you know, it kind of prides itself on being a creative city. When you look at those areas where creativity, whether it's East London or anywhere else, kind of flourished to begin with, you know, it actually just becomes a way of softening up the terrain for kind of gentrification and for regeneration processes that don't really benefit the artists, but often all local communities. So, I mean, it is quite a complex process how that works.
Definitely, yeah. There's huge debates around that. I worked in Media City in Salford when I left it last year. You know, yeah, you just like this northern powerhouse myth, but then you create, you drag it, you just export everybody in from London or wherever else, set up a BBC studio in a working class area.
They didn't want to go to begin with. They
They
were dragged by the thoughts they got there. They found they could buy a large 5-bedroom house
and you know,
flat London. They were like,
where's the trickle out to any of those local people living in that area of
I'll
Salford?
ask one of their engagement officers about how do you work with people from local communities. Well, there was nothing they couldn't see. They were actually making a tokenistic attempt.
I know,
to say,
it was
"We're working with this group or that group."
It was shocking, yeah. Really, a really bizarre place to work, I have to say. Yeah.
I think that is the norm. That you're these incredibly sterile, well-resourced environments that are deposited into local communities, claiming they'll create opportunities for local people, as did the Olympics in East London. And yet, of course, they don't. What they do is create employment for like an increasingly mobile kind of creative elite who migrate to that area, who are drawn in, you know. And
as you say, employ their friends, the cronyism that takes place everywhere. Yeah.
It's definitely a phenomenon.
Yeah.
And it doesn't surprise me it's happening in Hull. It happens in London as well.
Yeah.
Even when you think of London might be centre for those kinds of people, job it is. But when those developments happen in areas like East London, it's, you know, it's not benefiting people who live there for 2 or 3 generations. It tends to be benefiting the kind of arts professionals who are sucked into it. I mean, I can't always be overly judgmental. I'm sometimes part of that process. And I do a lot more grassroots stuff in those areas as well. And my PhD research is precisely on that process, really, how, you know, this whole process becomes like gentrification and steroids, and it really benefits local communities, especially local communities of colour, which is focused on research. But yeah, I mean, I think it's the same thing applies to the North, really, or the North in a generic sense, but it's perceived that way by Southern London, you know, Southern Arts funders. You know, unfortunately, it's I can see where you're coming from.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. We are coming slightly to the end of our time. Al, would you like to have any sort of conclusive thoughts or statements or anything?
Yeah, thank you very much for that. That was brilliant. I mean, it's sad to hear that it's everywhere, and that, you know, that it's quite good. There is this roaming band of people hijacking things, and the cronyism. Yeah, it's all over, and yeah, it makes me think that is it all part of that commodification game, that the artist is there to see the product, because that's what people see. So we get based on the product, and then, as Marx would say, we then get treated as a product, as a creative person. So maybe it makes me think there is more in the film about the mental health, that actually maybe it's more the arts therapy side is the future for the arts, that actually it's about how a person expresses themselves and communicates, and that's the value. So we're a process suddenly. So if we can appreciate the processes around us of other artists, and mix with other artists, and understand artists in our community who are also processing very similar to us. I mean, because the big artists are always over there, they're always down in London and all that kind of thing. It's like, no, the important artists are the ones that are processing what I'm processing. So I want to know them and see their exhibition and follow that as a natural part of being alive in a community. I want a baker, I want a butcher, and I want an artist, and I want a gallery. And if I'm thinking this now, just thinking now, really, that we're a process, and we need to make the arts more with a process, more of how, like your first question, how? Exactly.
In a more holistic sense.
How did you do this? That's more like it. How was that process? What happened? And we can share that process to the workplace, to industry, to community, society, political organizations, institutions, we can share our process maybe more. Maybe that's a solution that people have tried. I don't know. I don't know. But yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, for me, the future can only be the arts. I just feel that, you know, as the technology rises and the robotics rise, we basically got, I think the young, you know, to be sexist, the young women will be fine. I think the young women will communicate fine, have a nice time, use all the psychologies that women will use more naturally. Not exclusively, I mean, but in a sort of general sense. I worry about what young men do, because young men are all full of testosterone. And what we're going to do to entertain young men? How do we keep young men engaged when there isn't the work? And that's a scary prospect, because what young men do is compete and fight. And I say, generally, as a social sort of general, truthful little bit. So I'm concerned that if we don't have people being able to understand the pleasure of expression and produce things and share things properly, and we don't have everyone being an artist and have an actual creative society, I think it's very problematic, very dystopian. We either end up doing all doing as we're told, working in the humdrum pointless jobs that don't really need to be done and could be done in a lot elsewhere because we need occupying, or worse, you know, and we just go back to fighting each other in some weird lockdown kind of distant way or something. I think we need the arts. I think society need the arts. I'm really chuffed to be invited here and to say, yeah, let's talk about this and bring it into politics and economics. This is where, yeah, absolutely. This is where the arts should be discussed. Those cronies will carry on doing it. And as you say, we're all part of the problem. We've probably all benefited from some various cronyism along the way. And
yeah. Well, we'd like to applaud you as well. So thank you for sharing your work.
Thank you. Lovely. Thanks a lot.
That was very interesting. And if you could put your email, because I believe Matthias must have it, but if I can send you the recording, if you put your email quickly in the chat, and it'll just mean I definitely have it to email across that recording, if that's okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
Are you able to just type it into the chat?
Yeah, here it goes.
That would be really helpful. Thank you so much. It's been really interesting to see your work and to have these conversations.
Yeah, you should have that.
Thank you. That's perfect. I will get that sent over now. I'm just going to stop the recording.